Latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNewsGlobal. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and welcome to our special programming at an unusual time of the day because there have been unusual events. Our editor and founder and editor-in-chief of both StratNewsGlobal and Bharat Shakti, Nitin Gokhale, joins us. Looking at the 13th round of the India-China Corps commander level meeting that was held at the Chushul-Moldo border meeting point and trying to analyze both statements. Nitin, quickly getting into the meat or the crux of it, one would have thought that there would have been, if no movement, at least status quo, but there seems to be something that is probably unexpected.
It was indeed unexpected because the reasoning or the expectation was that after two successful rounds of disengagement following the 11th round and the 12th round, when there was a disengagement decided at Gokhale, there was an expectation that even at Hot Springs and nearby area, that the petrol point 15 will be resolved. It's a minor friction point is what one had thought. But clearly the expectations have been belied. The Chinese seem to have come with a predetermined approach to the talks and have rejected whatever proposals that were put on the table, not now, but even in the past rounds, about step-by-step disengagement at these friction points. And this was one of the shortest meetings, Amitabh, in the history of these current rounds. It was just, yeah, exactly. Otherwise, they've lasted 13, 14 hours, as you know, because of the interpretation, because of the lack of full understanding of each other's language. But this time it just got ended at about 7 p.m. last night on Sunday. And that should have given us an indication that this didn't go too well, really.
Right. You just want to break down, if you take the Indian statement first, we saw a graphic there with the main points. How India's position has been clear over the last few years, at least since Galwan, or maybe even earlier than that, that there is a difference between sorting out the issue on the border and India-China relations.
Yes, that was actually the entire approach since 1996, when the Peace and Border Tranquility Agreement was signed in 1993 and between 1993 and 96. After that, both sides had decided that they will not allow the boundary talks to impinge on the rest of the what we call the relationship, all other aspects of the relationship. So trade went on unhindered. There was some cooperation on climate change. There were other issues of people-to-people contact. All that was going on. But Galwan 2020 actually changed all that. And since then, India has maintained, as it has maintained in this statement that we see here, that India will not allow the border issue to be delinked in a way from the rest of the aspects of the relationship. If you see the statement, I can tell you, they have already said, for the first time, India said it very clearly that this was in accordance with the guidelines issued by both the foreign ministers in the meeting at Dushanbe. And the Indian side emphasized, and I quote here, such resolution of the remaining areas would facilitate progress in the bilateral relations. So it's very clear from Indian side, Indian statement, that India sees the resolution of the current dispute and the current friction points as a prerequisite for normalizing relations with China in other aspects of the relationship.
Sure, we're seeing some of the maps that our production team has made over the months now. Could you explain what was exactly being talked about yesterday?
Yes. So just above Hot Springs, between the Galwan River and the Shiok River confluence, which is PP14, petrol point 14, and Hot Springs, as you see here, there is the petrol point 15, which doesn't have a very distinguishing feature or a very prominent feature. That's why it is the PP15, as they call it. PP15 was supposed to be the focus of the discussions on Sunday, because this was actually agreed upon, the de-escalation disengagement initially last year, immediately after the Galwan clash on 15 June 2020. There was a bit of a disengagement between the two forces where they went back about 100, 200 meters on each side, either side. And the expectation on Sunday was that India and China would both agree to then further disengage from here, leading to a next step of the talks, maybe the 14th round of the talks. But since the Chinese straight away seem to have said that they won't accept the proposal, and they started blaming India for what they call unreasonable and unrealistic Indian ideas or proposals. I think the talks broke down there. I think that was the tipping point.
Right. Again, I just wanted to flesh out what you mentioned earlier, and that kind of dovetails into what Deval Das is saying. Chinese did this intentionally. Later, they'll say China and India are unable to find common ground, so China has taken this step slash action. They don't want peace or stability here.
Well, it seems so at first glance, and also let's not forget that the Western Theatre Command, under which the entire India border with China or with Tibet lies, the new theatre commander seems to have been instructed, or he has taken a position that the talks so far, or the kind of compromises that China may have made with India on resolving the friction points are not to be carried forward, and India must accede to or sort of agree to whatever China demands. And that seems to be the trend over the past couple of weeks, if not a month or so, since this new general has been appointed as the commander of the Western Theatre Command. So whether this has come from the top or it is his approach, the general who has been appointed, we have to wait and watch and then analyze with little more data available. But at first glance, it seems this is a new policy adopted by the new commander of the Western Theatre Command.
Aman Kumar writing in, is there any correlation, you've talked about it, between current domestic political problems in China and Chinese aggression?
Well, who can rule it out? But yes, China is known to try and create trouble on the border to sort of stir nationalism or passions about the border and create enmity or create a situation where people will start talking about the border situation rather than the situation within its boundaries. And China is reasonably, I mean, we can reasonably think of the kind of domestic problems that China is going through could be one of the reasons. They have coal shortage, there are power outages, there is unemployment, there is also the unrest in the CCP, at least at the higher echelons of CCP, about Xi Jinping taking full control. He is the sole target now of his critics within the Politburo and the Standing Committee. And perhaps all this combines to point towards a new approach or a fresh approach, which was adopted earlier, but for the last 1 year since Galwan was missing, about not compromising anything. And in fact, one word that has been used in the Chinese statement about sovereignty also shows that they have shifted the goalpost. Earlier, this was all about the border issue, the boundary issue, and India has also dealt with the LAC and the boundary issue as a boundary issue rather than sovereignty. Now, in the WTC statement, the word sovereignty has been used, which shows that there is a shifting of the goalpost, at least in this aspect of the boundary.
Well, I just want to thank, this is Indo-Pacific and World Affairs, who's put up a super sticker. I think it's Australian dollars 5 with the question. It's kind of away from the subject we are dealing with, but since he's taken the trouble, or she, can India now use this opportunity to put non-NTBs on Chinese cheap products, similar to what China did to Australia? I mean, briefly, and then we'll get back to our topic.
I think that is a reasonable option. I think last year when Galwan happened, India did ban some of those apps and made sure that in the telecom sector, at least the Chinese didn't get, Huawei didn't get entry, or ZTE didn't get entry into the 5G network that is being built in India, or that is being sought to be built in India. So therefore, I think that will happen. But I don't think India is giving up, or even China would give up so soon. Because if you look at the last paragraph of our Indian statement, they have said that we will continue to be in communication and make sure that the stability on the border is maintained. So India still feels that they can negotiate. At the same time, as you know, I was in Arunachal Pradesh just a fortnight ago and was in Ladakh following that. And I can tell you that India is prepared for the long haul. India is prepared for the worst. In fact, last year's experience in the winter, harsh winter in Ladakh, has made sure that India now knows exactly what are the weak points, what were the weak points, and India has taken steps to plug those weak points in terms of supply chain management, in terms of clothing, in terms of habitats for soldiers. So I don't think India is worried about any attack or any aggression from the Chinese. It's just that India and Indian and Chinese forces will have to now sit through another winter. Looks like the harsh winter in Ladakh, which is unprecedented, which has not happened earlier, and therefore it's a new situation on the border, a new normal perhaps, which will be used by us commentators very frequently going forward. But seems that China has decided that it may want to continue the status quo that obtains in the area since June 2020.
So those incidents that have taken place, and you mentioned the extensive coverage that you and Rohit Pandita and Shaurya Lenka got, all our viewers from Arunachal Pradesh. What happened, say, in Tawang, or what happened in Uttarakhand recently in terms of Chinese behavior? And I'm just going to take a couple of questions and comments. You've been explaining this, of course, all through. Can you explain the Tawang incident with some details? I'm sure you have information on it, and there are other
Well,
questions that also go on to say the Chinese have shown, our captured soldiers, which are, I think, even if they are verified, which they aren't, are old. Why haven't we done
yes.
so? You answered these questions in
We,
your previous programs, but go ahead.
I think I did, and I think I'll just say this, that India has so far continued to adopt what is considered a reasonable behavior in international diplomacy. Even with a belligerent neighbor like China, India has been gentlemanly, but I don't know how long this will continue. These pictures would come out, I'm sure. If not officially, they will come out unofficially somewhere from the Indian side going forward. But about the incident in Tawang, the area in which the Chinese tried to intrude in Tawang was something new that India has been dealing with. We know that in those areas the Chinese don't come very often, but having come there, they were surprised, I'm told, by the Indian response. India was at hand, Indian soldiers were at hand, Indian formations were alert. And the moment the Chinese came in there, they were not only given a face off, they were also outnumbered and outmaneuvered by the Indian troops there. They were detained for at least 3 to 4 hours before hotlines worked. The Chinese started calling up and asking for their release, and of course that was because there was no harm done. Like in the Indian officials unofficial statement, it's not an official statement, but sources have said that there was no damage to the Indian defenses in that sector. So clearly, what has changed is while the Chinese have become more aggressive, and India at the same time has also become more alert than before. It's got more troops on the border. The gaps have been plugged in areas like Tawang and in eastern Arunachal Pradesh. As I brought those reports, in fact, yesterday in Simply Nitin on Saturday, I did answer those questions that were asked. That today the Chinese find it surprising that there are more and more face-offs on the border itself, because India has upped its game in those areas. They have moved much forward than ever before. More formations, more troops, more technology, more surveillance equipment. So therefore, the response from the Indian side has been quicker than ever before. And this surprises the Chinese. In Barawati, which is a common occurrence of the Chinese coming in large numbers, coming, staying there for some hours and going back, has happened after many months, I would say. And that again, India sort of stood there. They also stood there and they went back. There was no physical face-off there in Barawati. But Tawang was different. Tawang, I think they were testing, probing Indian reaction, and perhaps they were surprised by the Indian reaction. And therefore, I would think this is not delinked from what happened in Barahouti and Tawang, what happened in the 13th round of talks on Sunday, would be also reaction to what was done in Tawang by the Indian soldiers. So it's a complete seamless kind of a border. Remember, despite different sectors. And I won't be surprised if it is linked to the Tawang incident, the Chinese aggression, Chinese obduracy in the 13th round.
Talking about linking, again, want to thank one of our regular interviewees, Salvatore Babones, who's put out a super sticker for $10 Australian. Should the LAC issue be seen as part of a larger pattern of unrest in China and Evergrande, the sudden closure of tutoring companies, provocations against Taiwan, and 1010 was just yesterday?
Oh, indeed, Salvatore is a very well-known China watcher. He knows it, and I tend to agree with him that when the domestic troubles increase, domestic unrest increases either on stock markets or in the society or politically, the Chinese always seek to sort of project kind of victimhood against against them. I mean, they play victim with in their dealings with other countries, and that's exactly what is perhaps one of the factors where now they have started saying that we will not compromise on sovereignty. This issue wasn't there when we were talking about the border talks for 12 rounds. In the 13th round, suddenly they bring up sovereignty, which means there is something more to it than just the I would say unreasonable stand by India on the border. It is more to do with the domestic issue, and I tend to agree with that.
Sanjit Mishra is putting up a super sticker for 200 rupees. Nitin saying government functionaries have been on record stating that the area commanders have a freer hand in dealing with local exigencies. Beg your pardon. Any evidence of this vis-a-vis recent developments?
Oh, indeed. As I kept on mentioning in my Eastern Arunachal Pradesh trip, I could see the kind of the leeway that local commanders have now to move troops, move equipment, which was not the case earlier. And even when there is a face-off, the local commanders have a reasonable say or reasonable latitude, I would say, to handle the situation as they seem fit, instead of going back up the chain, taking instructions and then taking action. I think that has changed. It is also the fact that there is much more confidence amongst Indian troops on the ground because of what happened in Galwan and subsequently the countermeasures on the Kailash range of the mountains and the disengagement that took place on the north bank of Pangangso, where in the Finger area, which we are seeing the archives. This is, of course, the Kailash range disengagement. But overall, this last 1 year's incidents on the border has completely changed the attitude of the Indian commanders who are much younger. They do not carry any baggage from 1962. And as I said, the complete movement forward by the Indian military, both the Air Force and the Army, has meant that there is much more confidence about the ability to take on the Chinese, even in smaller numbers, wherever they try to create problem. I think this is a complete change from even my own experience in the Northeast many years ago, and even in Ladakh in the past decade or so. I think that one must feel reassured about.
We're just going to take some of the Chinese media, which put out a statement, in fact, first, and the language there, if you can talk about that. And also a question that's coming in from Samas, who says, are India and China looking at a short shooting war before winter closes down the Himalayan routes?
Well, who knows, Somas? Remember all the previous agreements and arrangements about not carrying weapons to patrolling, not using weapons along the LAC. All that has gone out of the window in the past 1 year or so. When they said no weapons, the Chinese brought in the clubs and the barbed wire laced lathis and the rods, iron rods. So that has gone out of the window. India is not misjudging the situation as the Chinese seem to think. India now knows exactly how the Chinese behave. So I think a shooting war may be a little far-fetched, but another skirmish, another kind of face-off, and even another, I would say, larger face-off cannot be ruled out given the Chinese belligerence. And for that, India is now well prepared. I mean, that's something which has changed. And that I think the Chinese will take into account before creating any trouble. Rest assured, India is not looking for any trouble, but if there is some mischief done by the Chinese, India is going to then give an answer that is not only befitting but will be offensive enough, because both the north and the eastern sector now have offensive formations apart from the defensive formations there.
And Indo-Pacific, again, putting up what you just talked about, the talk of sovereignty, why China has brought it up, domestic consumption, the CCP wants to distract. Thanks again for that. Indo-Pacific, five Australian dollar question asked there. And one word, again, Nitin, you've spoken about this. India should militarily strengthen its eastern border, M777s, Apaches, LCH, Rafale, C-130s, BrahMos, the whole lot. You've seen firsthand, of course, what's happening on
I've
the
seen
eastern
all
border.
this firsthand, and I would request One World, who's put up $499, I think, $4.99, that is $5 nearly. Please do go and look up our YouTube channel and look up the kind of inductions, new inductions, the kind of fortifications that India has done in the eastern sector. There is Rafales now based in Hashimara. The M777s are now based in on north bank of Brahmaputra, which can be then transported anywhere. And of course, as I said, more brigades have moved forward closer to the LAC than ever before. Although India in the eastern sector still has some gaps to fill, but I'm sure with time, I think this is going to happen. And this is what I said, I think, early morning, this morning, that PP15, Patrol Point 15, was to be the main focus. But it has shifted goalposts and talked about sovereignty. And I think that's something that we all who watch this sector or this particular aspect know that the Chinese are known to do this, and they will, I guess, and this is very well put by Ajay Date. Yours is ours and ours is mine. And in CCP's case, everything is mine. So that's the Chinese way of negotiating, and I guess we'll have to see from here where do we go.
Right, where do we go? There's another super sticker that's up for 1,000 rupees. India should plan a war on Pakistan in winters and China freezes. Finish it, then organize more forces on the China front. Things will never improve. But just on a more serious note, where do we go from here? And I'm putting up Bruce Wayne asking this question. Are we always going to be in talks and keep on lengthening it? Meanwhile, incursions keep happening.
Yes, I think there will be a cutoff point where India will determine for itself by thinking of how reasonably well protected, well defended Indian border is, or on the Indian side, what the preparation is. So I think at the moment this approach suits India. That if the talks get prolonged for another 6 months or so, this is the second winter, 2021, would mean that all our fortifications and all our defenses in Ladakh, as well as offensive capability, will be fully in place, and anything that happens in 2022 can then be taken on with greater confidence. So I think from here we go to a state where India now not only strengthens its defenses, but also reasonably gets ready for an offensive operation when required, and which is what the Chinese are aware. See, what happened in 2020 was the manifestation of the Chinese understanding that India is getting stronger and stronger in terms of infrastructure, in terms of deployment, in terms of surveillance capabilities, and therefore they wanted to stop it there. So now, having stung India, what the Chinese have done in a way is that the stalemate which was there earlier, the casual approach, I won't say casual, kind of a moderating approach that India had taken, that there is enough time to build infrastructure or not have enough forces there, has got all telescoped. So what India would have done in 5 years in, say, Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh in terms of building infrastructure, building strength, has now been done in 2 years. there's a rebalance of forces, as you are aware. There is one corps from Mathura, which is now looking after Ladakh as an offensive formation. 17 Mountain Strike Corps, which was supposed to be a swing formation between East and the West, is now completely dedicated to the East, which means the Eastern Command of the Indian Army now has four corps, three in a defensive role and the 17 Mountain Strike Corps in an offensive role. So therefore, this is what the Chinese have achieved by their tactical aggression. They've actually lost India strategically. They've provoked India into doing things which India would have done in 5 years time frame. India has done that in 2 years because of the Chinese aggression. I think that is what is China's loss. And what next? Next summer, we'll have to go through this winter and be very, very careful and very watchful in the coming months of winter, which starts, end of October. So that I think is the next step. India has to strengthen its defenses, get the winter stockings right, get all the habitats in place, which have already happened, but still further refine it as we go along.
Right, lots of questions coming in, but I think we leave it for now. But just putting up a personal request to you, Nitin, because there's a super sticker from Akshit saying, please keep your DM on Twitter open.
Okay, I'll do that. I didn't know it's closed. I will do it. Somebody yesterday told me, so I will do it today. I will certainly do it today.
Nitin Gokhale analyzing those late night and early morning statements that both India and China have issued. We'll also have more detailed analysis at 6 p.m. live with our editor Surya Gokhale speaking to Lieutenant General retired Rakesh Sharma. Nitin, thanks for that quick look. I think we kind of preempted all the other mainstream media channels, and of course the papers will only come out tomorrow. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Amitabh. Thank you for the questions that all the viewers have put.
Yeah, thank you for all our live viewers. I can see a maximum of 341, which will be much more. And thanks to all the viewers who will see the stream a little later when they can. That's the advantage of a digital platform. You follow our social media handles, and if you haven't so far, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You've been watching StratNewsGlobal. I'm Amitabh.